thoughts in your mind that you aren't good enough, that you'll never be successful? If so, you're not alone. I've had those thoughts playing in my mind ever since I took the leap to become an entrepreneur. It's a dirty, dark secret that no one likes to talk about, as the glamorization of becoming an entrepreneur is shown in the media. I realized that in order to succeed, I needed help. We all do. So I decided to go all in on myself, spending thousands of hours in the trenches, reading, joining groups, listening to podcasts, hiring coaches to develop a bulletproof morning routine for success. Join me on my journey as together we build our morning fire to ignite our lives as entrepreneurs. My name is Jeff Wickersham, and this is the Morning Fire for Entrepreneurs podcast. Welcome to the show. I am excited to have Alex Brueckmann to the show. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Excited to be here.
So I love getting into state. So we talked a little bit. We're going to do 3 power breaths in through the belly, up through the chest, raise our hands up. Then we're going to get a power boom in. If you're watching this live, Alex has a 19-month-old toddler. So he's not going to be doing any screaming. I'll bring the energy. If you're listening to the replay, that's why it's only me, because he had a tough night sleeping last night. So we're gonna make sure that that baby sleeps a little bit more. So let's go ahead and breathe in and out. Good. Another breath in and out. Good. Final breath in and out. All right. Now I'm going to count down in 3, 2, 1, and boom. There we go. If you're listening to this podcast, Alex did the boom without any kind of sound, and it was awesome. So appreciate you playing along. So obviously with a 19-month-old toddler, morning routines are a little bit scattered, right? So this is a perfect question to ask, because I know I have parents. I'm a parent. I know I have parents that are going through those same stages of life with their kids, right? Where they might not be sleeping great. So what's 1 or 2 things you do to trigger yourself to, hey, snap back into business mode and really go down that path towards success?
I have to admit, my routine was very clear before I became a dad. That has gone down the drain completely, because your focus shifts. And while my routine was kind of getting up in the morning and taking care of business, now it's taking care of my son. So typically when he is awake, so when he has a good night, he would be awake early. I would spend some quality time with him in the morning, and that really fires me up. And even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, it's something that I'm super passionate about, because those times are gone faster than you can imagine. So I try to spend those 5 to 10 minutes with him in the morning, see him smile, and that fires me up. And then I would get a coffee, of course, hop into the shower, and that's all I need, basically. Sometimes I even would step out into the backyard and breathe in some fresh air. So now that we are approaching the end of August, temperatures at night here in the Lower Mainland around Vancouver, they drop significantly at night. So we had like 10, 11 degrees Celsius already. So fresh air, a bit moist, and it's something that gives me energy. And then I just get the day rolling.
Love it. And I love just the process of seeing your son, right? And there's a grounding, and there's something just so deep rooted in that, and him probably smiling or doing, and it's that's your momentum to go. That's the fire to get it going, and it lights up your soul.
And the days he doesn't smile at me in the morning, he kicks me, which is also giving me energy. So that's also fine.
That's great. So Alex, I'd love to hear a little bit and share a little bit with the audience and listeners, a little bit about your background, where you came from, what you're all about, and then we'll dive into, I know we really want to talk about business strategy today.
I think what's important to understand when we talk about business strategy is the angle that we take to approach it. And I typically do it from 3 different angles. Okay. Because that's how I was kind of socialized, if you want. First, big corporation. After business school, several years into one of the largest media corporations in the world, where I learned about strategy as a strategy manager, supporting a CEO in his quest to turn around one of the business units. Then later as a business consultant, as a management consultant. And 2 years ago, I actually started my very own business as an entrepreneur. So those are three different angles that I often take when we talk about business strategy. It basically reflects my career so far.
Okay. So let's take the entrepreneur side, right? And 2 years into the business, why do so many entrepreneurs really struggle with business strategy?
I think the biggest reason for that is that they did not have any structured exposure to the topic during their
Okay.
career. It's just something that you don't come across just everywhere around every corner. If you are an entrepreneur, you typically started your business based on a passion, on something that you wanted to bring to the world, something that you figured, hey, I'm good at that. I think I can build a business around that, right? And your first approach was probably not to sit down and think from a business strategy perspective, using certain strategic tools, certain question processes. You probably didn't do that. And that's totally fine. But at some point in time, you might have realized you hit a glass roof, kind of. There is just something holding you back to grow your business even more, to be more profitable, to build a business that gives you more freedom. And that's when I typically come into play and just hand over some tools. Most of the tools that I use, they are actually for free on my website. You can just download them and work with them, start getting your head around the topic of strategy. And when you then figure out some key elements in this process, for example, how your vision should look like, meaning how you want your company to look like in 2 to 3 years, for example, and you break it down into measurable increments, and you then decide which priorities you want to focus on, you will all of a sudden start to flex that strategy muscle. You will think in different ways about your business rather than operationally fixing stuff here and now, serving a client here and now. You think more longer term, more strategically, and more you focus your time and energy in a different way in order to get there.
Yeah, and a couple of things you pointed out there was the structured exposure to the topic, and so many times I would say, to agree with you, it's passion. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it, right? Not really put any business strategy to it. And then the powerful questions that we can ask ourselves, right? And how many times, if you're in the weeds, if you're really transactional in the business, you're living in the business, not really focused on the business, do you see that vision, or if you take time to look at the vision, hey, this is where I want to be 2 to 3 years out, right? So
and the question is, how do you then work towards it? It's not that you just write this down and then you go back to normal, right? Because you will lose yourself in the day-to-day. The operations, the tyranny of the urgent is always more important than having this long-term vision and working towards it. So if you're not intentional about your strategy, it gets eaten away. The time that you can invest, the priorities that you build for yourself, they get eaten up by day-to-day hustle.
Right. So related to business strategy, what are 3 elements that someone that's hearing this now that might say, hey, all right, I need this because either I'm beginning in the entrepreneurial game, or like you said, I'm hitting that glass ceiling and I can't get past it. What are 3 elements to a winning strategy?
First of all, you need to understand what a vision is. A vision is not a fancy marketing claim. It's not something you write on your website and be like, hey, boom. It is something that is super individual for your business. A description, and that can be a whole page that you write down, a description of how your business should look like and feel like in some years down the road. Just imagine you time traveled. What is it that you want to see when you take a look at your business? And you can approach it from various angles. You can talk about target markets, target clients. You can talk about revenue and growth rates. You can talk about what your employees and maybe the competitors and your clients say about you, how they perceive you in the marketplace. All these things are important angles to writing down, to visualize how your business should look like in the future. That's the first important step. The second step is then to think about, okay, if that is my vision, how do I actually manage over that period of time, over the next 2 to 3 years, that I'm getting closer step by step? we cannot just write it down, go back to business as normal and hope that things will now work differently. It's not going to happen. So we need to break it down into measurable increments, KPIs, kind of success factors that we need to take a look at. And we're talking maybe two handful, like a car dashboard with some indicators here and there that tell us whether we are on the right track. Because if we realize that we are not on the right track based on some of those indicators, we have a chance to adjust our strategy and to do things slightly differently on the way. A strategy is not a static thing. It's a living and breathing document, something that helps us, like a piece of collateral that helps us invest our time in a better way, invest our money in a different way, and that helps us kind of benchmark potential opportunities against whether they help us to get to our vision or not. And that's the third step then. When you have broken down your vision into manageable and measurable KPIs, you need to think about, what do I actually need to do in order to move the needle on those?
Right.
And this is where you put strategy into action. So all of a sudden you have a vision, KPIs to measure it, and priorities or strategic buckets, or however you want to call them, basically work that you need to do in order to move the needle towards the vision. And in those buckets, you would then find things that you need to do, actions. So you would then start to, I don't know, build a new website, for example. That is not a vision. This is an action, an activity, something that sits there because it helps you, for example, to gain more visibility out there in the marketplace. And that might be one of the elements in your vision, that you want to be seen as one of the top 3 providers of that type of service in your industry. So you need more visibility. And if you don't have a website, that's where you would probably start.
Gotcha. And then, so, related to the vision being super individual, I would assume very detail oriented, right? Very specifics all over the place, because if you're not specific, how are you going to drive towards those numbers?
That's an important element here. A vision must be specific on the one hand, but also needs to be aspirational. And sometimes the things that you aspire to, you can't really put a price tag or a number or something on it. So your vision can be aspirational, and it can sound a little fluffy here and there. It's not a problem at all, because you will break down that fluff into actionable KPIs afterwards. Gotcha. So if you, for example, we had this example of wanting to become one of the top 3 in your industry. What you can say is, I become an industry leader instead of that. So it doesn't have the top 3 in it, so it's not necessarily concretely defined, but what it has is the term industry leader. And then in your KPIs, you can break it down and say, okay, my industry has probably 10 serious players in it. Industry leader means top 3. And that again means I need to be, measured by my clients in a certain way. You can use net promoter scores. You can use size of revenue to define whether you're top 3, and so on. So it can be fluff, but you need to break it down in order to manage toward the fluff.
Gotcha. So managing and measuring the KPIs, how often, when you work on strategy with clients in your own business, how often are clients typically measuring or checking their KPIs? That's a common question that I have, and I'm sure listeners have as well.
It's actually a really good question, because you don't want to measure yourself to death. That's not your business. Right. Your business is not measuring. Your business is something else. So in an ideal world, you already measure certain key elements of your business. You, for example, have, a weekly routine to check your sales funnel. You see how many leads you have. You see how much revenue you generate based on those leads. So revenue or lead generation metrics, they are there anyway. So use them also for your strategic dashboard. You will not have everything in place. So you might want to create some of those KPIs and continuously measure them. Continuously does not mean every day. Continuously can mean 3-4 times a year. It depends on what that KPI actually measures and how important it is to be able to adjust immediately when you see that this KPI does not develop in the right direction, right? So 2 handful of KPIs is typically more than you can handle. So don't make it more than 10.
Okay.
Think car dashboard, not rocket ship. And of those 10, max 10, you would typically have at least half of them anyway on your radar. Because just because you come up with a new strategy does not mean you will move from, I don't know, a product business to a services business and have therefore completely different KPIs. It can happen though, but typically you know how to measure success in your business. You just add more KPIs that help you think more strategically than operationally.
Gotcha. Okay. And we actually had a question come in from a listener. I'm going to show it to you there, Alex. So it was, what do you think are the best metrics for B2B sales of a SaaS-ish business model?
Are we talking strategic metrics or operational metrics? I assume strategic metrics because we're talking about
He says,
strategy here.
Yeah, both tracking progress internally and proving metrics externally.
Let me put it that way. A software as a service business is a distinct business that has distinct sales cycles, that has a very clear sales process. It's way more leverageable and scalable than traditional businesses. You should, if you talk about strategic metrics, you need to think strategically, not operationally. So you would not look at how many individual users or how many corporate contracts with how many individual users you close. You would look at your growth rate. Strategy is always helicopter perspective. It's not nitty-gritty detail, not down to the weeds. It's really helicopter perspective. And you would take a look at what are the key metrics that tell me that I'm moving towards my vision. So just because you're running a software as a service business does not mean you all have the same vision. So your vision is something that needs to be in place first before you can actually break down the KPIs. So I'm just making this up now as an example. Let's assume your vision says you want to grow in the next 2 years in North America, right? So that's your first, you're sitting in North America, it's your target market first, before you then expand to Asia and Europe and Australia, for example. Okay. So then your KPIs would certainly look differently than if you were going full globe at the same time.
Right.
Your KPIs are more specific. You could even say, we want to serve 50% of the S&P 500. That could be some element in your vision. And then a KPI would be kind of a yes/no. Are we on track to reaching this specific metric in our vision over the next 2 years? And if you're working toward that, of course, you will have a ramp-up phase, and your timeline needs to be mirroring that. So you can't just say, okay, we have 3 years. We want to be within those 3 years. We want to have 300 of the S&P 500, and that's 100 a year. That's not how it works. But you still need to understand that you can't have no S&P 500 company in your clients for 2.5 years and then hope that magic will happen in the next 6 months will bring you those 300, right? Right. So you need to approach it from a perspective of where am I right now, where do I want to be in the specific context of your business.
Gotcha. Thank you. I appreciate you jumping in and answering that question off the cuff. So, creating a business strategy, what are some concrete actions that people can take today to move the needle and develop that strategy?
I think strategy is easier than most people think. Getting your head around the topic of strategy is not that difficult. It's a certain muscle that you need to flex, a certain skill set that you can acquire. And if you're running a company, it is an absolute critical skill set. You are the one driving this business. So you are in charge of making sure that the future of the business is successful, profitable, generating jobs, generating profits, and ideally at the same time, also doing good, not just doing well, right? So a very concrete step is to educate yourself around the topic of strategy, to listen to podcasts, to read books about business strategy, to, for example, go on my website and read some articles on my blog, or just using free resources that are out there, not only on my website, on many other websites as well, where you can learn about strategy and start to get your head around it from a perspective of your business. So not cookie cutter stuff. I mean, you can read tons of books about strategy. As long as you don't take the concepts and apply them to your reality, they are just books. So apply them. Start to think, okay, what does that mean for my business? If I want to write down a vision, how do I do that? And just experiment with it. Start to strengthening that strategic acumen in you, the ability to act and think strategically. That's probably the first step. And then it's really about getting your people together. If you're a solopreneur, it's you plus maybe, I don't know, your spouse. If you have employees, bring them together for a few hours and talk about vision. Let them share their ideas and try to verbalize it. Write it down. As stupid as it sounds, write it down. It doesn't matter whether it's in your head or not. It matters when it's on paper and your employees understand it and you can talk through it. Writing crystallizes your thinking. Once you write it down, you realize whether it's actually worth pursuing or not, or whether it's kind of flawed here and there.
Right. Love that. And that's a perfect segue. Alex, where can, I appreciate you being on the podcast and talking strategy. Where can people find you?
Just go to my website, alexthestrategist.com. Right there on the landing page, just really the front and center, you will find a button you can click that gives you my free intentional strategy toolkit, where you can start working your way into writing your vision, understanding it, breaking it down into KPIs, and then defining those priority areas that you want to focus on in your business. So it's totally free. You can just download it and start getting your head around it. And if you struggle at some point in time, somewhere, just reach out. I'd gladly jump on a free call with you. No strings attached.
Awesome, Alex. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thanks for watching. Have an amazing rest of your day. Rise, fight, love, repeat. Get after it. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to the Morning Fire for Entrepreneurs podcast. You now have the knowledge, but without action, knowledge is useless. Choose to act. Choose to step into your greatness and unlock that hero inside of you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and leave a review so more entrepreneurs can hear this message. If you absolutely love this podcast, which I hope you do, then share it up with someone you know who might see benefit from it. Become that beacon of change, and together we can impact the world.